Today we will talk about Agentic AI, simply put, AI that can plan steps and take actions using tools and data to deliver outcomes. This type of AI is not just a Q&A anymore, as you might well know. It can do tasks, it can talk to systems, work with people. And in the next 62 to 80 minutes, we will look at the profound implications of Agentic AI into our businesses, teams, and individual roles as well. So, my name is Frederika Hazeová, and I will be navigating you today through this debate. And here are my panelists. I will start with the lady Viktoria Lukacova Brajcunova from AI Robocube. Welcome. To my left, Adam Taylor from Confluent. Welcome. And the great boss, Max Furmanov from Accenture. Welcome, Max. I see you have fans. That's good. So let's go directly to it. Last year, many people asked, also here at OpenSlava, if AI can really change business as usual, or if it's only an experiment. So what do you see? What was the progress in that last year? What do you think?
Yeah, I think absolutely it can, right? There's obviously a lot of investment. And as Max pointed out, though, I think there's a lot of challenges today. And you still see a lot of projects failing. But we've also seen the successful headlines. And I'm sure Accenture, more than anybody else, can certainly tell us where companies are succeeding. And it's definitely with, I think the small tasks that are common threads across all industries. So certainly like customer service, right? Which is something where the knowledge for these generative AI models already is shared primarily across industries, right? And I think now you're starting to see it, or even coding, right? Vibe coding is certainly working very well. I don't think the claims of 100% of code is going to be written by AI next year. I don't think that's actually going to pan out. But you are seeing a much larger percentage of AI starting to do the undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? And I think that's a trend we're going to continue to see.
Thanks, Victoria. Max, any other remarks?
You can speak into it. Okay, so last year we might be still skeptical about whether Agentic AI would be working, but as colleague mentioned, it's already a reality. What I'm seeing also is that we are also seeing a shift in how we approach towards the automation in terms of from rule-based automations towards goal setting up automation. And that shift is actually, I think, a real game changer in terms of other things which needs to be developed, governance, control, frameworks, how those agents are going to operate. So this is actually a big topic right now as well, and it's going to develop further.
Yeah, look, I think AI definitely has the power to transform things, but at the end of the day, AI is just a tool, right? And you have to use it properly, in order to make change. I think plenty of organizations are failing at that, and plenty of organizations who are doing it properly are actually making change. I've seen a large airline use AI looking at their scheduler, scheduling a flight. Scheduling of flights for a large airline is immensely complex. And there's so many data points that we as humans just simply cannot, look at all of it. So they used AI to actually look at their scheduler, and AI suggested very minor small changes to their scheduling that optimized, their efficiency by more than 15%. And they found things like, for example, this airline had a flight coming into, let's say, Seattle, right, at 7 p.m. at night, and they had a flight coming out of Seattle at 6 a.m., right? So those flights are 11 hours apart. That was less time that you needed a crew to rest before they can fly again, right? So there's regulation on how much time crew has to rest, before they can fly again. So if they move that flight up by an hour, they can reuse the same crew. What they were doing instead is they were flying in a different crew, and the crew from last night was waiting for some other flight, right? So they made that change by an hour, but that created all these downstream changes they needed to do as well. And only AI can really look at the whole aggregate, all the touch points and all the dependencies, and very quickly say, okay, you should make these 4 changes, right? So this is the power of AI, but when it is used appropriately, right? When you use it, I mean, maybe you guys heard my anecdote about the light switches. When you just use it to digitize an existing process, it is not an effective tool, right?
Thank you very much. I would also add that all of you can ask questions if you want, or also our watchers and viewers online. Use the hashtag Open6 at slido.com. Continuing on with Agentic AI specifically, what's the biggest change, Max, that you think that it's bringing to enterprises today?
Sorry, biggest change that what?
Agentic AI. What are the biggest changes that it can bring to enterprises and businesses today?
Without a doubt, and I think my friend Adam here will agree with me, it's about data. The biggest change Agentic AI is going to bring to organizations is their ability to analyze data they have not been able to analyze before. That airlines example is a perfect example of that. But as I said in my presentation, organizations have an enormous amount of unstructured data that is not clean, and they've analyzed less than 1% of it to date. Agentic can transform that fundamentally and create value out of that data, create business impact, create change, create new revenue opportunities, create savings. So if I was to say the one thing it's really going to transform is organizations' ability to create knowledge, right? There's a famous quote that software engineers use, right? That organizations are drowning in data, but are starved for knowledge, right? And that's the thing that Agentic can change.
Adam, do you want to follow up? You seemed like you were twitching a bit.
I was going to say, that's a phenomenal answer, and I absolutely agree with it, because I do think every AI conversation always has data, and it's always about how do you get the value of your data. And I think more and more when we look at all of the data that's flowing around us nonstop, how do you take advantage of that in real time? And I think that's the real game changer. It's one thing to say we can go off and in the background do a bunch of analysis and come up with a new game plan for next week or next month or next quarter. But it's another thing to be able to look at these very complex problems with all of these different signals and all of these different variables and start unlocking the power of doing things more dynamically, doing things more personalized, and getting insights that otherwise are just too overwhelming, I think, for humans to look at on their own. So it's an amazing tool that will unlock, I think, value in real time by pulling all of that data together.
It's actually something that your speech touched as well, that data is like the real-time fuel for intelligent action. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And every conversation I have with any executive, they are always asking us, and I'm sure you all feel this way in the room as well, they're always asking us to do more with less and to do it faster, right? And so that window of time of getting a signal and being able to take action on it is always shrinking. And so being able to organize that data and understand that data and create knowledge is going to really separate, right, the leaders from the laggards.
And I just want to point something out. You said something important that I want to highlight. Real time. Real time is really important here, right? If you are running a supply chain business, it's not helpful for you to know what you need in your supply chain at the end of the week, on a Friday night batch job. You need to know that in real time. And having that insight, not just having the knowledge, right? But having that knowledge in real time is a key component.
Thank you. However, if we go one step back, Viktoria, if you could explain what is the difference between a bot and an AI agent? Is it like the obvious that we think, or are there also some deeper nuances in that?
So is it very simple? Bots, they execute tasks according to rules we've given to them, and they break if something has changed. On the other hand, agents work around goals, which means they can understand, they can adapt, they can learn, and basically if something changes, it can come up with a solution. That's the biggest difference.
Okay, thank you. Max, you mentioned today in your speech that composable architectures and AI native operating models are key, right? And in simple terms, what makes an agent different from a traditional app, for example? If you could also give us a real case from enterprise operations. You already talked about the airline, but if you could add some more.
Yeah, so to me, the key difference is that an agent orchestrates a transaction across your entire enterprise in a way that's not always predictable, right? So just like that airline example, think about the number of systems you need to touch and the number of systems you need to update in order to, change that schedule, right? So to me, having the architecture model, the architecture foundation for agents to be able to do that is a key success factor, right? Is a key ingredient for agentic.
Okay, thank you. Adam, if you could maybe give us one before versus after example where these real-time events led an agent to act in seconds, some case from real life.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the canonical example for us at Confluent is in financial services with fraud detection, right? So again, being able to shrink that window of time with how fast you can detect that something is fraudulent saves banks millions and millions of dollars, right? And being able to shrink that window down. Do you guys remember the time when you used to have to notify your bank that I was about to travel, right? To make sure that they didn't just automatically capture something as fraud because it happened in another city, right? And those were very heuristic-based systems. They were not adaptable systems, right? And now with that data flowing in real time, they're able to adapt and follow us along the way, and they can make very dynamic and maybe non-deterministic answers, right, and solutions. And so I think that is always the canonical example. I think another great one would be a service like Uber, ride sharing. There's no way Uber works and gets you as an end user and as a customer to have the trust in a system like that without it happening in real time. Being able to see in the map that this driver is actually coming towards me, being able to see the real-time data of who's picking me up, what their rating is, where I'm actually located versus where they're located, I think is another great example of being able to unlock brand new opportunity by completely disrupting and reimagining how some of these processes can work.
Thank you. Can you maybe think, Viktoria, about a case example where an agent removed, for example, manual steps end-to-end, that it helped us to get there faster and without some manual steps with human interaction?
There's the one we actually implemented, which is called AI Dispatcher. It's something like in flight industry, but we had a case where a customer needed help with focusing on profitability in arranging the routes for their orders. So what we've done is that we've took orders directly from the systems, made a pre-planning and in order to actually see how it's going to flow throughout the week, and work throughout all 7 systems and with 47 parameters until robot actually or AI agent planned those routes. But the core was about that we didn't really make that change and manually automated all those tasks. But we've asked agents to focus on profitability, which you normally couldn't do with all your fleet and take into account all those stuff. So this agent with the data, with the complexity, was capable actually to focus on profitability while managing all the orders and all the steps and all the system which were involved.
There was also a question in Slido which was already, I think, deleted, but highlighted for a second. If you could share an interesting example, would you choose this one or maybe share another?
I think this is quite complex on proving what AI agents can already do.
Thanks. So these are some really good examples, but however, Max, you mentioned in the beginning that some companies fail when they try to implement it. What do you have in mind when you say that?
Well, so the example I used in my talk, there was a financial services company that instituted an automatic trading algorithm that lost $440 million in 45 minutes. They went bankrupt. On the first day they've implemented this. So it's like when you have these algorithms and agents that are acting in unpredictable ways, you need to have the right governance and rules, in there and guidelines, right, in order to, make them effective.
So is this maybe the component that is often missing in early on projects? Because we could look at it if they miss data quality, tool access, guardrails, or maybe people skills. Are these the guardrails?
Yeah, I think there's two things missing. One is, I don't think people have been thinking about what are the guardrails I need to put in place because, the agent doesn't follow a deterministic path, right? So I need to put in guardrails. And I think most organizations have realized that. I think the second challenge now is how do I implement those guardrails, right? How do I implement controls? How do I not just think about what they are, but how do I programmatically implement those controls so the agent doesn't go, haywire on me?
Yeah.
Rogue.
Max, Victoria, do you see the same thing missing in early on projects, or maybe what do you think are the most often fails?
So I think a lot of times, it comes back to the data, not actually having your data ready. I'm not going to belabor that point because I do think, some of those, some of those other challenges are having the right guardrails in place. And I think that's where agentic architectures can really help transform a business. As opposed to building like a monolithic AI-based application that somehow this one AI is going to know everything. Splitting that problem up into a bunch of tasks and potentially even organizing how we organize sometimes as humans, like having this, having an organizational model of checks and balances, right, that can verify that what the AI did is actually reasonable. I think I mentioned AIs always give you a confident answer that they're right. And AIs, we've also found out, are really good at detecting when something is wrong. But you actually have to ask that question twice now, right? You can't always just expect in one shot to get the entire answer back and get it back correctly. And so I think that's where having the ability to orchestrate multiple agents with multiple round trips and being able to have all of the data and all of the context to send into those agents will really make the difference.
Sounds a little bit like communication in relationships. Victoria, anything to add to that?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Even if you are building agents, so aside of giving the goals which you want to achieve, you are actually setting up the guardrails or basically what a robot should or shouldn't do. You are setting up the KPIs and KVIs in order to see, basically, to set up what you want to achieve, compliance, restrictions, and anything else in order to make sure that those doesn't go over.
Thank you. Would you like to add something? Or yeah, you're just getting ready. We have a lot of young entrepreneurs here, students, people who are maybe starting up. Can you think of a small pilot that would be safe and fast to try first, for example, or recommendation for using agentic AI?
Well, I think this one has already been done, so you couldn't steal it, I guess. But it's one of my favorite examples. That's very simple to do. How many of you guys have gone to your doctor and then gotten, from a doctor the summary of your visit? Right? You've seen that? Have you ever tried to read that note? It is incomprehensible. I've tried, and I'm a fairly smart guy, right? I can understand, the basics. I've tried to read some of this stuff. It is incomprehensible, right? So there was a company that actually created an agent that will sit there and listen. Oh, and by the way, your doctor spends about 20% of their time writing those notes. So if you come in for a 2-hour visit, they're spending another 40 minutes or whatever, right, writing up the notes about your visit. And it's an enormous amount of time. It's hugely ineffective, right? They're not spending time with patients, with you guys. So there's a company that came up with an agent that sits there and listens, to the doctor, and then writes up the notes in a way that a human that's not, an MD can understand, but also writes it in a way that a doctor can understand if they're, let's say, sending you in for a referral or whatever. Now, going back to the previous question, you have to be extremely careful with guardrails here because you don't want that thing to hallucinate and tell you you've got cancer when you have a strep throat. So guardrails is really, really important. But this was, I think, a phenomenally simple use case where it was done with very little integration, very little, anything else. That is a really powerful tool.
That's a very interesting example. Any of you, something to mind coming?
There's one which I had actually discussion with former colleague earlier today, and he was telling me that they were trying to use AI agents over ordering processing exceptions. So it doesn't. Most of the ordering process is already automated, but those exceptions are really great pilot to start with because it's like a low risk. Agents are great for it because they can manage those exceptions and figure out the way how to do that. Plus, you've got a high volume where you can train it on.
Thank you.
I think I'd answer it slightly differently, right? One, I think one of the great things about AI is this democratization that is happening, or almost this deflationary capability that's emerging, where now anybody can go dip their toe into it. To me, if it's passed my wife's test and it's a technology that now my wife is able to go use and leverage in her job, it's hit mass adoption. And so I do think the ideas are endless, right? Now that it takes more than just or anybody besides a data scientist, right, can go do this, which is absolutely amazing. And I think for those that sometimes struggle of getting AI adoption done internally, if your company is a little more, we'll say, risk adverse, or if you have regulatory concerns, one of the great places to start is actually with your legal and compliance groups and find the use cases to start bringing them on board. Because actually you find as more people get exposed to it and the more experience they get with it, they start to see the value that can be applied. And they can certainly also see some of the dangers and risks, but getting them that understanding can certainly help accelerate adoption in other areas that you want to move forward with.
It's also really safe to say that AI agents touch legacy systems, governance, cybersecurity, and compliance. Max, if I am a CIO, for example, what's one step next quarter that I should do, and what's one mistake to avoid?
Yeah, so I think compliance is actually a great example where it can be used very effectively, right? And I think organizations should look at compliance because it's pretty easy. AI is really good at reconciling data. You can see it even with ChatGPT, right? Like if you ask it some controversial political questions, it's actually pretty good at reconciling different points of view that are out there and presenting it in a way that shows you, kind of how different opinions tie together. It does the same thing with corporate data, right? So like, again, go back to the example I used in my talk of Citibank. This is, you guys can Google this. Citibank paid $135 million in fines last year to the Securities and Exchange Commission because they've not been able to reconcile data. They looked at two different systems, and the, end net result of their, amount of money they hold on their books was different from the two systems, right? Well, AI is really good at looking at that and reconciling it. So I would say, that is a great, first thing to go and look at. At the same time, what to avoid is, I would say, you got to put the guardrails in place, right? You got to make sure that it isn't looking at, data that could potentially create fraudulent, outcomes, and you got to validate, all that data. So you have to have the principles in place and implement it in order to ensure, you're not creating fraud.
So is it like one control or one policy that you always add? Because if we really want to design the governance so that the agents are safe and useful, so is this the one control that you would always implement to validate?
Absolutely. And, you have to define your set of rules, and you have to make sure those rules are implemented and validated. And that another thing that you have to do when it comes to governance is you have to record what you're doing. Right, regulated industries have gotten really good at this. Banks, healthcare industry, they actually record a lot of the things they do. But other organizations that are not highly regulated, like retail, they actually don't do that. Right, they don't create an audit trail of what has happened, and that is really important to do. I think with agents and agentic, because of the way they can behave, may not be repeatable. So you want to actually capture what has happened, what has transpired, and if there is fraudulent instance or whatever, you can trace back to how it occurred.
Okay, thank you. I think we could look at a few questions from Slido, so we don't end up, because there are quite a lot. One, which is the most popular, is what would you recommend to students who focus on regarding both hard and soft skills? What should they focus on?
Communication and storytelling on the soft skills part. I think, in life, it's always about relationship building. And being able to manage those relationships. Believe it or not, AI can be very, very helpful with that. I sent a lot of flowers recently to a lot of different people for a special occasion, and I did actually use AI to help me write. It was about 25, different highly personalized notes, and the feedback I got was absolutely phenomenal. For those little, it was like 3 sentences long, you only have to send it. And, when my wife found out I used AI, at first she was like a little taken aback. I'm like, the AI can't do that on its own, right? It doesn't know my relationship. I actually probably fed way more context into the AI and spent way more time using the AI. The AI was there to help wordsmith and refine it. So I definitely think the soft skills around relationship management, building relationships, maintaining relationships, being able to communicate and tell good stories is really important. And then I think there's always this understanding on the hard skill side. I tend to say be a generalist and be an expert at everything. We heard the quote today about we're not intended to be specialists, and I couldn't agree more. So I would tend to focus on, trying to learn something to become an expert in it, and then figuring out how to apply that same set of skills over and over. The analogy I use with my kids all the time is they like to build Lego. I love to build Lego, and I try and view the world as just a bunch of Lego bricks, right? Regardless of what it is.
Thank you, Viktoria.
I don't know whether it belongs to hard or soft skills anymore, but it's prompting. So even when you're building anything, now it's all about prompts, right? So we're building AI agents, we're building something, we're using ChatGPT. It's still about the prompting if you want to get the right outcomes.
Yeah, I think maybe to continue the point you were making, Adam, I think we've over-indexed on specialization in our schools. We have too many young adults coming out of universities who know Java, but don't know how to program, right? And we need to, I think, go back to teaching our young, adults coming out of school on not, the specific language, right? But more abstract notions. And if I was to, abstract that even further away from tech, you guys probably know there's a lot of controversy in the US around universities, right? Right now, I think the one interesting thing in that whole debate is our universities, in many cases, aren't teaching kids to think. They're teaching them what to think, right? And I think we need to go back to teaching people not what to think, but how to think, and leave it to them to discover what the answer is. And I'll tell you, when I hire people for Accenture, I am not looking for a Java engineer. I'm not looking for a Python programmer. I am looking for smart, curious people who can learn the next Java or the next Python, right? And not necessarily just know today's languages. So I think we've over-indexed on specialization, and we need to come back and pull back from that a little bit, learn concepts.
That's a very good note also on education. Also, if you look at it, developers' roles are changing. Are there some new skills that the teams should learn?
I think everybody should be learning AI tools. How do I work with AI? How do I leverage AI, right? We all have a responsibility to learn that. And I think, Tomasz said it really well in the morning. You're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job to someone who knows AI.
Mm-hmm. There's also a question connected to that. The third one, what is the biggest challenge that non-tech enterprises face when adopting existing agentic solutions? It's a difficult one, maybe. Viktoria?
We'll give Viktoria all the hard ones.
I think the biggest problem is the mindset shift, because all the companies are working in the environment of controlling how certain steps are being done. Whereas now with Agentic AI, you have to really focus on the outcomes, and that mindset shift is actually blocking, I believe, a lot of companies in order to adopt Agentic AI.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like, I think it's culture, right? The hardest change is culture. And actually, I'm not sure I agree with the premise in the question. I actually think for many companies that are not tech, it might actually be easier to adopt agentic and AI technologies because it's a culture change. It's not a technology problem, right? Like, I guarantee you, if you have some basic understanding of tech, you can go spend 2-3 hours online and figure out how to build an agent. That's not the hard part. The hard part is how to get it to work for you and do something valuable to your business. And that is a cultural, it is an operating model, it is an organizational change. And many organizations that are grounded in tech just really struggle to see the bigger picture. So in my view, it might even be easier for companies that are not tech to adopt it.
Can you think of any example of that?
Well, like that little startup I was talking about that helps with doctor's notes, it actually wasn't technologists who built it. Right? It was business leaders from a hospital that stepped away and did this because they knew what the problem was. They weren't constrained by legacy thinking, baggage, technology. They just they saw what it was and they learned some of the tools, or they hired some people that learned some of the tools, and they solved that problem. So it's all about culture, I think.
Yeah, that takes us back to Adam's point before, that everybody can dip their toes in the water. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Another interesting question: how will Agentic AI change customer interactions with brands? Is there a risk that brands will lose their identity if customers don't visit company websites and allow agents to handle everything, so all the tasks for them? Who would like to address that? Adam, you can start.
So I think it can go both ways, because I believe again, AI is just a tool. And if you can learn how to leverage that tool and maximize that tool, I think AI, I do think we are entering this age of abundance where, everything will just be beautiful and amazing. And you can create amazing experiences and delight your customers and actually start treating your customers as individuals. And that can scale whether you have 100 customers or 1 billion customers. Sometimes that small business mentality is so great because you develop this relationship and this level of personalization you have with a business. And I think AI can now bring that even to the businesses that have billions of customers to them. So I think, like anything done right, it has the ability to go off the charts and completely change how we interact with businesses, how we think about brands, and how brands cater to us. And I think likewise, it can go the absolute opposite, right? If you want to nag me nonstop using AI and get 100 interruptions on every communication channel possible, I'm probably not going to like your brand, right? If you want to manipulate me, if you want to create this environment where I can't trust you, I'm sure it can definitely backfire, right, and go the other way.
So first of all, I think this is a brilliant question. I had dinner with the chief revenue officer of a very large global hotel chain. If I told you what it was, you'd immediately recognize it. 2 weeks ago. And he said something to me that wowed me. He said 30% of traffic that now comes to their site to book a reservation comes from chat agents. 30%. So he was asking, well, what does that mean for my brand? Like, if people are going to ChatGPT and saying, I want to go to Bratislava, give me a good hotel, and it just gives you the hotel, you're just going to book that hotel, right? How does he ensure that his brand is recognized and represented there? This is a huge challenge for organizations, and I think the answer lies in what you said, which is personalization. How do you become hyper-personalized? How do you enter my space, right? And you have to earn your brand almost again with your customers through different channels, and you're not going to have the traditional vehicles to do that. So I think organizations are going to have to invest in personalization to do it. But this is a huge problem that I think a lot of companies are starting to realize, and it's happening very, very quickly, right? Imagine 30% of traffic now going through a completely different channel. This happened overnight for them, right?
Completely different channel that they can't control as well.
That they can't control, exactly, right? And doesn't respect their brand, doesn't, it's not their website where they can control what things look like and how it's represented and, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you. How can companies begin developing meaningful guidelines for deploying autonomous AI today without waiting for future regulations? Anybody? Victoria?
I think the same way how you're teaching your employee to follow your guidelines, you just basically build them based on the way how you want AI agents to interact and train it for that.
Thank you. Anything to add?
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, I would just add that you have to be ahead of regulation in this space, right? And you have to look at ethics and values of your organization, of what you want to represent to think about this, right? We believe in this very, very strongly. We sit on a board of a very interesting business ethics organization called FASPE, if you guys want to look it up, FASPE. But I would just say you have to be ahead of it. You have to constantly be thinking about it. And regulation is always going to be behind.
Well, we can say, I think, that agents are unlocking some new business models and roles. What changes in, for example, operations, finance, or HR did you see when agentic AI has been starting to be used? Did you see also something in this sphere?
It has been already mentioned in here, right? It's going to be a complete shift, right? So operations is going to be completely automated, at least that repetitive ones. And those people who are going to work in that area would have to also do the shift. They would need to be more generic in order to be able to manage those outcomes and actually refine and set how those agents are going to work. And that goes for operations, that goes for finance. HR also is going to look for a different type of people to hire from the skill set perspective. Training, retraining, that's what comes to my mind right now.
Thanks. Are there maybe some risks connected to agentic AI that are over-feared?
Well, my favorite one is that it's going to take away everyone's job, right? Like, I don't think that's the case.
Why not?
So I talked a little bit about this, earlier today, but fundamentally, this is an evolution of technology, not a revolution of technology, right? Agentic AI is going to optimize and it's going to make things we do more efficient, but it still fundamentally requires the characteristics that are, innate to humans, right? You still have to, define your intent, define your objectives, right? I used the quote this morning, right? Gen AI may be able to write Java code better than I can, but it cannot decide to want to write Java code, right? So giving it that intent, I think, is what humans are going to be doing. And I'll tell you that historically, as we've made programming and made, doing technical things more easy, we found more things to apply that to, right? Like, think about all the connected devices around you. Think about all the things we program. Electric vehicles today have 3,000 silicon chips in them, right? So we'll find more things to program. This is not, I think that it is an overblown fear that it's going to take over what humans do. I just think it's going to change what we do. It's going to require us to learn new tools and new ways of working, but I think that fear is way overblown.
Thanks.
Yeah, no, I would totally agree. I think it's an amazing enabler and accelerator to get things done quicker. I like to think too, certainly the early use cases are a lot of the undifferentiated heavy lifting. And so it's allowing us to go focus higher up the value stack, right? And add more and more value, to our organizations. And sometimes I use this comparison of, not too long ago, every IT shop out there was running massive email clusters, right? Is anybody's IT shop today running email clusters, Probably not. Maybe like a government somewhere. And so it's not that email went away, and it's not that those tech jobs went away. We're now focusing on adding more value and differentiated value than just supplying, digital email communication.
I would add probably one more, and it is that AI agenting is going to be like create like a huge catastrophic mistakes. And that's the big fear as well when people are thinking about agentic AI, but it's really about setting up the guardrails, governance around it, etc. And it's possible right now, so it's not something it's going to destroy.
This is such a natural fear, by the way. Like, I just got to tell you guys, my oldest son is in college, and he's studying data science, okay? And I have this conversation with him once a month. Like, he calls me up once a month, and he says, Dad, did I pick the right major? Should I still be doing this? And I'm like, don't worry, just understand how this stuff works. Understand the foundation, understand the tools. You will figure out creative ways to apply it, so there's no need to fear. But fear is very widespread.
Yeah, fear of mistakes is very, very general in people, right? It's very deep inside of us. So on the opposite side, any risk that is maybe underestimated? We already mentioned the guardrails. Anything else in that sense?
I think it's giving up very soon on agentic. Because it's like development, as you said, evolution, not revolution. So you have to train that AI agents in order to achieve the right results. And it's not like from the day one that it's going to deliver the results you want to.
I also think it's also a very interesting paradigm shift where in technology, it was very binary, right? It was true or false, right or wrong. And with AI now, it's non-deterministic, and it's a probability, right? So we've almost gone from like digital back to an analog-based answer, right? Like, how confident are you in this answer between 0 and 1? And I think a lot of times businesses are looking for AI to be infallible, and us as humans aren't even that, right? And so as we continue to build these more sophisticated systems, I do think it's, again, not giving up just because it may have gotten the wrong answer. With my human teams, I get the wrong answer all the time, and what do? We iterate on it, we recognize it, we iterate on it, and we resolve it. And I think that similar things apply when we start talking about AI as well.
Yeah, I think that not giving up is a great one. And also, do not take the human out of the loop and out of control on critical decisions. To me, that is the absolute most critical one. 2 plane crashes with the Boeing Max 737 planes. There is, from the analysis they've done, they believe pilots try to regain control and either did not understand what was going on and what they needed to do, or could not take control over from the computer that was flying the plane, that misread sensory data and crashed the plane. 346 deaths, right? So I think that is probably the worst example, right, of taking humans out of the loop on some of these critical decisions and letting agents, run wild. And we have to be really, really careful in that. And it goes back to the previous question you asked, which is, is it going to take over our jobs, right? No, we still have a really, really important role to play in this.
Thank you so much. Coming back to the questions from the audience, so far AI is mainly based on big data processing with goals input from human operator. What are the next steps to have AI being creative in a way that it creates its own goals and filters qualified data with a global goal instead of specific and deterministic ones? So maybe taking the human out of the loop a little bit.
Well, so it shouldn't create its own goals, right? I think we should set goals for what AI does. But I think the amount of data it can use is almost infinite. If you think about, what we've done so far is we've trained a bunch of language models on text, and we've used, a ton of text. I saw an interview with Sam Altman, the OpenAI CEO. At one point, he said, we're running out of text data, like, published good data to feed these things, to train them. But the reality is, if you look around the world, around you, think about all the visual data, think about all the sensory data, think about all the audio data, think about biometric data. There is an enormous amount of progress we can make by taking other modalities than what we've done. Text only represents, there's various estimates I've read, less than 10% of different modalities of data that we can use. So there's huge power in it, but we should never give up goals and intent setting, to AI. That should be us.
Do you agree, Viktoria, Adam?
Yes, although I would say not yet.
Yes, I absolutely agree. But I don't think it's wrong to also use AI to help generate some of those things, because AI can be creative, right? I still need to prompt it, and I need to define some intent, right? I need to be intentional about what I'm doing, but you can definitely have it play roles like devil's advocate, right? We even see that, right? Even in software testing, right? Go be an adversary and go break this. And it can understand things and certainly help us, again, think about things that we wouldn't normally think about today.
Yeah, and I guess I separate the creativity and the desire to create and the description of what you want to create from the actual creation itself, right? Like, I don't know if you guys were in my friend Ezio's session earlier. Ezio said that something like, every one of his slides was created by Gen AI that he used, which is cool, but I guarantee you he prompted Gen AI with a lot of different prompts to create the slides he wanted. And that's how it should be, right? Ezio's probably as good of a visual artist as I am and couldn't, draw for his life if his life depended on it. So we use AI tools for that, but the intention, right? Describing what we want, setting the goal for what we want to create, that's us.
Just like Adam's cards with the flowers.
Yes, there you go.
Yeah, that's right.
That's absolutely right.
Do you believe most people will trust autonomous AI agents enough to let them act on their behalf?
Has anyone been to San Francisco and sat in these self-driving cars, car taxis, Waymos?
Anyone here? One person.
It is. You guys have seen them on the roads, right? These little cars driving around with no human in them, and like you call it like you call an Uber, and it pulls up, and you sit in it. It's like a generational thing. I did it with one of my kids, and my kid was like, "Oh my God, I couldn't wait to get into this car again." I was freaked out. I was like, "Man, there's no one in the front seat. I don't know where this thing is taking me. I am terrified." And so maybe there's a generational thing to it. I guess I don't know.
Thanks, Viktoria. Adam, any thoughts on this? Or maybe how do you feel?
I do think figuring out how we trust AI is going to be important, right? Like just thinking about that, the 30% of traffic now being directed from AI to that website. When Google first started, it was purely organic. And there was this level of trust that somehow they had found this algorithm, right, that broke the internet, and they could now organize the internet and find exactly what I'm looking for. Last time I went to Google, and I probably shouldn't be picking on a particular brand, but like, I think I got 2 organic search results and everything else was paid and sponsored. And so there is, I think, going to be this level of trust. How do I know I am getting something that's organic, and it's not, there's not manipulation being done behind the scenes for that. And then I will say the ultimate level of trust, though, is like, would I get into a car and trust it with my life? And I think what's interestingly, me personally, right, and this is just my personal take, I think I would trust that type of AI over some AI telling me this is the right product to go buy, right? Because I think there's more incentive to not kill me than there is, to make sure I'm getting the right product.
Viktoria, anything to add, or
Just sum it up gradually with experience.
Trust has to be earned.
yeah, that's also fair
So
for
I think
AI.
it's going to evolve, right?
How can we ensure that AI search systems remain unbiased, as Adam already mentioned, and don't reinforce misinformation or filter bubbles? So a bit of a different question. Can we ensure that?
I mean, they're inherently biased based on information you feed them, right? But I think it's going back to the guardrails we set up, right, to validate, monitor that, and ensure that they remain unbiased.
I think it's also about retraining and seeing the outcomes and making sure that it understands and avoids those biases.
Yeah, and I guess I would also add, while I don't have that solution, I think another thing to think about when we talk about hyper-personalization is also not creating an echo chamber, right? And still being able to open us up to diverse opinions and differing opinions and different ideas and different products. Just because I never looked at this one type of product doesn't mean I'm not interested, right? If so I do think there's some randomness and entropy that also needs to get injected back into the system as well.
And we've seen the evolution of how technology is getting better at this, right? Like I remember when you first. When ChatGPT first came out, it had a very strong confirmation bias. So if you go to ChatGPT in the very beginning and say, is Emmanuel Macron the best French president, France has ever had? It will actually say yes, and here's why. If you then follow up and say, is he the worst president France has ever had? It'll say yes and follow up with why, right? So it was basically confirming whatever bias you were projecting onto it. And I think since, if you go and ask that question now, it'll try to give you a much more balanced approach. It'll say, well, some people think it's this because of X, Y, and Z, and others believe that because of A, B, and C, right? So we've seen that evolution, and I think we'll continue to see that, and we need to be as professionals who help organizations adopt this technology, we need to be responsible in helping put in those same guardrails.
Thank you. What are some common use cases for real-time data processing using Flink?
Real-time data's got to go to Adam.
Yeah, great question. Whoever said that one, I love it. So I think you have this ability, and where I was talking in my keynote about shifting left, right? So this idea of, everybody should be able to have access in your organization to the most up-to-date view of what a customer is and everything that customer was doing. And one of the ways you can do that is with something like Flink, right? Being able to take all of these different data streams in real time and being able to pull them all together and develop, that master view of customer, let's say. And so I do think that's probably one of the next evolutions of where we're starting to see these real-time data products emerge. Traditionally, I think this would have been called master data management. And now we're calling it data products. And I think it's then creating those data products in a more real-time fashion. So they're always up to date and always available.
If we looked at data products, what makes them of high quality to agents? Is it just the freshness and the real time, or are there some other aspects?
So from a high quality standpoint, it has to be trustworthy, right? People have to want to use that, and people have to believe this data is accurate and this data is right. So again, being able to use some of those tools like Flink to be able to define some of those data processing rules, and being able to make sure the data is of high quality and high trust is very important. And another great indicator of that is reusability. If it's one of your most important data assets, so at Accenture, employee was probably the most used data asset everywhere, right? It's 800,000 people. Everything we do internally is based around on enabling those employees to go deliver for their customers and their clients. And if no one was willing to use your version of the employee, chances are it was low quality and low trust, right?
Okay, thank you. To make AI truly work for you by simplifying processes, unlike Max's light switch example, what are the first 3 steps that you would recommend?
Well, I don't know if I know the first 3 steps, but I'll tell you the first step, which is don't talk to the person who's invented the process, right? So outsiders in view, right? I think the mistake we make is when we try to transform a process, we go to the person that invented the process or the person that's been running the process for the last 17 years, and we say, how would you do this differently? Well, they're just going to tell you to digitize it. If you ask the guy that invented a light switch how you'd apply digital technology, they'll tell you to digitize the light switch, right? You have to have an outside-in perspective. One of the things we've done is, one of my clients is, like I already said, a hotel company, and we've actually had people observe, go into a hotel environment and observe what their associates do as they check people in or help answer whatever questions people have, right? and provide recommendations for how to transform a process. So outsiders in view, to me, is a key way to do that.
Thank you. Anybody wants to add anything? No.
I also think like that, exactly that, right? In order to reimagine a process, you can't necessarily use the person who created it. And I also love the idea of like incentivizing deletion, right? And like taking this ground up first principles approach, right? I think the more you can delete, because over time we just continue to add and add and add. We took a great walking tour to dinner yesterday, and as part of that tour, the tour guide talked about how, you know, the town hall started as one small building, and as all good bureaucracies do, it continued to grow to the next building and the next building and the next building. And I think our processes over time do the same thing, right?
What is your view on investment versus benefit of wide AI deployment across enterprise organizations? Any views on that? You can say no, it's okay.
I can start. First of all, I think the only way you get benefit is through wide deployment. Because again, it goes back to not, trying to digitize, a step in the process of what you do. It's actually looking at the entire value chain, which happens across an organization, and looking at a wide deployment. So that's number one. I think it only works when you look at it holistically, end to end. To answer the question of what's the right investment, I think we as an industry are still trying to figure that out, right? I mean, I think, you saw some of the, I shared some of the stats, right? Like there's been $3 trillion invested in AI or something like that, or some insane amount. And we haven't seen value from that. So I think, again, it goes back to, looking at what is value driven, what are you trying to affect, how do you create the right business outcomes? And we're still trying to figure out what's the right investment versus benefit.
Okay, thank you. Viktoria?
I think it's also like, as you mentioned, Max, about looking on the goals you want to achieve, and whether that investment is achieving what you're targeted to achieve. So if you don't see any improvement, then it wasn't a good investment.
Thanks. How should policymakers balance innovation in agentic AI with consumer protection?
Well, that's a good one. That's a good one. You guys want to start? Anybody?
Yeah, there it is. It's highlighted now. How should policymakers balance innovation in agentic AI with consumer protection?
The short answer is they don't, right? Like they typically come in too late, and then when they come in, they overstep and they stifle innovation, right? So I think governments should stick to enforcing laws and thinking about how those laws apply in the new sphere, right? Whether it's digital or consumers in the AI space or whatever, and they really need to be careful to not stifle innovation in this space, because we need innovation, and I think that it's gonna, countries that do this better are gonna take a leap forward in driving innovation in this space, and governments need to be careful to not be in the way while protecting people, right, from based on the laws that you've got.
Thanks. Can you think of any potential big non-AI topic that you believe is not getting enough attention by the businesses these days because of all the AI hype?
Real-time data.
Real-time. What else would you say, right?
Architecture. I mean, all the things that enable AI, right? Like, to me, again, the hard part is not, let's go build an agent. The hard part is, do I have the right foundation in my enterprise to do? It's the boring stuff. It's the non-sexy stuff. Everybody wants to talk about ChatGPT and agentic AI. The reality is, in order to make that work, you need a strong architecture, you need real-time data, all those things.
I think at the end you're building it as a collaboration tool, right, between what you already have in form of the systems, in terms of agents and in terms of the human. So it's really like all that framework around that, which I think is going to raise a lot of questions right now as we're starting implementing those AI agents. And that's going to be probably the most focused topic than implementing AI agents.
I'd be interested in Max's take on this as well, but I would love to see more focus on growth as opposed to cost optimization and cost cutting. Because I think that's where the creativity and innovation can really start to transform things, right?
Yeah. Is that legal? Is he allowed to ask me questions?
I think you can, yeah. I'll allow it.
So I think you're right. And I think that organizations, one of the reasons that you see this as a technology that's now being pushed down into organizations by like boards and the C-suite is precisely because of that, right? The conversation around cost takeout is, with the CIO, right? Hey, congratulations, you just got hired as the new CIO of whatever organization. Here's your budget. Next year it's going to be 10% less. Go figure out how you're going to do that, right? That's the remit to CIOs. But this is exciting because it's a business remit and it's looking at, how do I provide new services? One example is, I think in the telco space, the telcos are telecommunications companies, right? They are looking at how do they provide AI native services on the edge because they own the network, they own the infrastructure, so they're uniquely positioned to provide you with compute capability, AI capability, and higher level services on top of that, throughout their network, on edge, at the edge devices. So I think organizations are thinking about it. The first natural place to go is how do we save costs, but this is a unique technology that will drive, I think, revenue growth.
Thank you. Are there some new topics or way to use data that is now possible only thanks to AI agents, except improving some existing issues like monitoring, which generates a lot of data to process? Can you think of anything else?
Yeah, I think anytime you have a process and you have humans doing something, I do think there's opportunity to say, how can I digitize that? How can I automate that? And how can I plug in some intelligence to that? When we talk about data in general, right? Obviously, the more you use the data, the more data you're going to create. And so I also think AI and agents have the ability to filter out the noise or the unwanted data to truly bring about the knowledge and anomalies. And I know somebody asked a question about Flink earlier, and another great use case that we do see is combining traditional AI and machine learning with things like generative AI. So great use cases on using Flink with anomaly detection to say on high frequency data event generation, here's an anomaly. Now I can run that anomaly through an agentic AI that's going to be much slower, certainly more expensive, but it can now extract a lot more knowledge about the problem, what that anomaly is, and push that out to an end user to have all of the knowledge they need to go diagnose that and handle that problem. So,
great, thank you, Adam. Would you like to add something or?
I just want to add that I'm still amazed how AI can recalculate all the options from those data. And what we're going to see is also that only what we are not only what we're predicting, but it's going to come up actually with a completely new things and solutions which we've never think about before.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and my favorite example is I have a little device now in my car that tells my insurance company how I'm driving. And so they're using that data to actually, in real time, calculate risk. Wow. Right? So if you think about how insurance companies historically calculated risk, it's a very stupid process, right? Like, it's not about you as an individual. It is about group of people you belong to and what they do. Like, are you married? Well, I mean, maybe statistically, if you're married, you're a safer driver, but that doesn't say anything about you individually. So they're now using, data that's real time, that is specifically about me, and they're using it to price risk, and it's really cool. And I will say my insurance has gone up since I've used it, so I should rethink whether I should be using it or not, but
very interesting,
probably
really
accurate.
So last question, could you, from the audience, could or do increase of AI usage shift the work focus back to individuals or local markets in opposite to previous globalization and centralization of effort? I think Adam already mentioned the topic of personalization a little bit, so what do you think on that?
So we're a global economy, right? And technology, I think, has always enabled advanced collaboration techniques, right? And so where I think AI can truly help is I think bringing that local flavor and that local culture, right, to these global solutions. It was interesting. I was talking to somebody about the differences between traveling in the United States and traveling in Europe. You know, in the United States, I live in Chicago, and I can get anywhere pretty much like 3.5 hours in the United States. But every time I get off that plane, I'm still in the United States and still kind of like the same, right? I'm just going to another big city in the United States. In Europe, you can go anywhere pretty much in 3.5 hours, but every time you land, it's a totally different culture. It's a totally different experience. It's a very diverse geography. And so I think AI can certainly help bring that diversity, right, to the globalization of the economy and of the workforce.
Thank you. That's a very interesting concept.
Yeah, I would just maybe add that 100% it will put focus back on individuals, 100%, right? Because of what we talked about earlier. I think, you're not just going to be, one of 17,000 Java developers at Accenture or wherever you are, right? You're going to be an individual who knows how to solve a given problem if you use the right tools to do it. So you become known for what problems you solve, not for, the skill you have that's like everybody else. And I think the point around globalization, I think this will, again, it will enable us to bring work to where the talent is, right? The best talent will win. The people that solve problems in the best way, they will win.
We usually end discussions with like a recommendation for the audience or future expectations, but I think you've already covered all of those. So I would ask something different. Did you hear today, here at OpenSlava, something that blew your mind or that really inspired you or surprised you that you would like to mention that's worth of mentioning?
So for me, I think first of all, just being here in Slovakia and at this event, absolutely amazing. The best part of my job is actually being able to come to events like this, to meet all of you as individuals, to hear about what's important to you, what you're struggling with, what you get excited with. And so I absolutely love that. And then, on top of it, right, the icing on the cake was it's an event sponsored by Accenture, good colleagues, good former colleagues and friends of mine as well. I do think that the one takeaway for me, I think, Max, it was in your presentation, your keynote this morning, when you put up some of those statistics, and it's about, I think you had like the stat of, it was like less than 1% of data is actually being leveraged today inside of our systems, right? And there's this immense amount of potential. Like, it's absolutely staggering to me about how much unlocked potential is there, and it makes me think about, right, like the stat of the human brain of, like, I forget what percentage, right, of the human brain we actually do use. If I used 100%, I'd probably remember that stat. But, like, if you could actually utilize 100% of your brain, if we could start to utilize 100% of that data, I can only imagine the possibilities, right, that humanity will have in front of it.
Great example. Thank you. Victoria?
I'll take it probably from the different perspective. I did have a chance to talk to a lot of people during this event. And what surprised me was how far we are already in the culture shift towards AI agents. I really thought that we're just starting, but I did meet a lot of great people already, like, moving to the directions, which I thought actually that it's not happening yet, but it seems we're moving there.
So Victoria stole my observation.
That's fine.
I totally agree. Like, I think the energy here and the curiosity is really impressive. And I think how this event has grown. I was out here, I can't remember now, maybe 8 years ago, 7 years ago, before COVID. And how it's been transforming the energy of the people, the curiosity of the people is really phenomenal to see. So thank you all for showing up and engaging.
Thank you very much. Thank you for showing up here for this discussion and today's event. Thank you for listening to us, also those who are watching online, and enjoy the rest of this really inspiring event. Thanks.
Thank you.